I think a lot about opponents of gay rights. Perhaps this goes back to my own socio-cultural background where I witnessed many Christian leaders in my community, in my part of town, organize themselves and their congregations to specifically rally and oppose against measures that were being proposed in the local government about protecting queer people, that is gay, lesbian, transgender, bisexual people, intergender, all those people who are just so-called sexually different, protecting them from hate crimes. And at the time, the irony did strike me of this being the Fairness Campaign, as it was called, and the religious right, particularly the African Americans, posting signs that said no fairness. So this video is primarily directed at them in our tradition of discourse and dialogue. So I want to talk about the story of Jesus, what it has meant to me, particularly as a non-Christian, but in my, I am overwhelmed I feel full with Christianity. And that's what strikes me, why I want to reach out, because I feel as if even not growing up as a Christian, I still have this overwhelming sense of faith in the stories that are told and how they can transform people's lives. So this is a compliment, in a sense, to those people. And in addition to just seeing that in my own life. But here it goes. For me, Jesus' crucifixion, as many in the tradition of Black liberation theology, the crucifixion story, it represents sacrifice on one side, but not sacrifice for power as many would read it, but specifically, the only words in the Bible, as I've heard told, where Jesus actually utters words, from Jesus' mouth on that crucifix. And he says, Father, why have thou forsaken me? And it's in pondering that, contemplating, deliberating on that from my own understanding, I see how people can come to a very anti-gay sentiment. But for me, when I go back to that story, I think of the Lovings. I think, one reason why Jesus' story resonates for me is that it's very rights-based. It's very identity-focused. So I'll get to that part in the end, but I'll tell you quickly about the Lovings. What I saw in the Loving story, the civil rights, can be called a civil rights case of the Supreme Court striking down anti-misogyny laws in the United States. This was a couple who had met in the 50s, been woken up from their beds upon going home to visit their families in Virginia because, interracial marriage, she was black, he was white, was banned. So, hence you see where I'm going with this, with gay marriage being banned. And so the young lawyer who fought the case opened his opening argument was based on the Lovings being able to go to bed at night and knowing that their children will be able to inherit their property, knowing that the surviving partner will be able to collect Social Security, in a sense to wake up and know that to go to bed with the comfort of knowing that they could wake up with their family intact. And it's significant because it sounds very theoretical as I talk about it, but we have to also remember that this is based on a case where literally these people married in D.C., went home to Virginia, and had a police officer wake them up in the middle of the night and carry them to jail, escort them to the state border, and ban them. So judge, jury, executioner in one night. Now you see how that story resonates with gay marriage, and also how we look at another group of others, immigrants. And when we're not talking about Ellis Island immigrants from Europe, we're talking about people who, who perceived to be crawling across the border. So the case in Texas that went to the civil rights, where Sandra Day O'Connor, I believe, gave the her statement as the judgment that could not ban sodomy because it infringed upon people's rights. There were two men, a white man and a black man in Texas, who had been drug out of the bed. And you see with the Loving case, you see again, you have the idea that people are just drug out of the bed doing something immoral. I'll get back to the immoral part, because that's where the AIDS comes in, and back to the Jesus narrative of death. So not only do you have the idea that these people are drug out of their beds, but I want to continue with what that narrative would mean based on the Loving's case, but also based on how we look at immigration. We're talking about dragging people who out of their homes, and the children are just there. I mean, look at all the rights we've stripped away from so-called illegal immigrants, children. So again, we get back to this idea of there's something that happens in that bed that should allow us to wake up in the security of ourselves. And we have inscribed this in rights in our Constitution in the United States. And so I go back to the story of Jesus, and I think, why have you forsaken me? And I think of how our labeling of certain kinds of relationships is immoral, in a sense, to make a very narrow sense of what is moral. Calling the Lovings immoral, and against God's will. Specifically, what people said, saying that immigrants from south of the border are immoral because they're breaking the law and that's it. And of course, this over homosexuality and homosexual rights. Now remember, we're talking about what happens in the bed. And for the Loving's case, what they keep saying, is that they have the right to create their version of family. And our inability to embrace that is what makes us as a society immoral. When I look at a gay family a gay couple creating family around them, a lot of people, just like many discussions, go back to what we do with our genitalia. And that's where I think the argument becomes very banal, but also related to how we see AIDS. Initially people called it a curse for gay people, and then you have other people who start getting it, and it becomes they're immoral. They must have done something, drug use, or sex with all these partners, or out of wedlock. That's from a woman, Ugandan woman, who was diagnosed in '88. Who's saying this. So she was reluctant to even embrace the family around her with her HIV positive status because she was labeled an immoral person. And you look at how people wasted away, literally, like Jesus on the cross, wasting away because the society around him said, you're immoral. And I see that is in many ways one of the, many metaphors that there are to embrace the story of the crucifixion from moment to moment. In the next moments I have different things I'm thinking about, and a different need to see something different from that mythology, from the story of Jesus and his crucifixion. And I see it as, look at us. I always look at what he said is, look who are the people who were left behind to witness the crucifixion. What do you do so that this doesn't happen again? And I don't see us doing that as lay people in America, as Christians, and particularly Christian fundamentalists. I don't see us moving more towards Jesus' story of life. And it is best exhibited, of course, in gay rights, as I said, in the way that we talk about what is family. If we reduce family to what any two people do with their genitalia, we literally say that we have the right to walk in on you in the middle of the night and yank you out of the bed. That we literally have the right to step on you, spit on you, call you names in school, call you names at work behind your back, kick you out of your job, kick you out of your house, make it impossible for you to create love. And where there is no love, that's what we're against. Anti-fairness, anti-love. That's what Christian fundamentalists are fighting these days. And it is a losing battle, because we know we are right. We know we are right because we know, just as I'm saying, we read the same Bibles, the same Qurans, the same scriptures as you do. And we know that at the core of who we are, even neurologically, we're wired to be social, not antisocial. And I think that the exclusionary practices of modern day Christian fundamentalism is what characterizes them. Not that they embrace each other in community, but that they in a sense see it as raising arms against the other. It's still stuck on, and in many ways, people see themselves in the sort of crucifixion, and they see it as someone who has been martyred and they have to avenge. It's a very different understanding of the very same story of crucifixion. So do we learn from it compassion? Do we develop our empathy through these stories? Or do we, at best, have sympathy for the other, banish them to waste, bleeding, stabbed, dejected, because nobody was strong enough to stand up? I'd like to dedicate this video to Elián González, the Cuban boy who was caught up in an international row between Cuba and the United States, and excuse me, and ultimately who was terrorized by federal agents, taken at gunpoint in the middle of the night from his grandmother's bedroom in Miami,